Obviously we're at Heathrow at the moment.
Yeah.
So we're on the holding point Alpha for runway 09 right. Basically when we take off we'll be doing a couple of circuits. Now before we get up in the air, I'll brief you first on the controls of the aircraft,
Okay.
then the displays, and then we'll go a bit more into the system. So you already have a basic understanding where all the controls are, don't you?
Yeah.
So I'll just sort of breeze through this. So while we're taxiing, we obviously need to steer the aircraft using the nose wheel, and for that we'll be using the tiller on the left hand side. So lifting it up right, pulling it down left. Once we use that to line ourselves up to the runway, when we actually go to take off, we won't use the tiller for steering on the ground anymore. We'll use our rudder pedals, so right pedal right, left pedal left. And then once we get up in the air, just using the yoke to fly. So get a bit of a feel for the yoke just so you can feel how much resistance there is. So turning, you can see there's not too much resistance at all, it's quite light. But then with pitch, you can see it's quite a bit of resistance.
Yeah.
So get a good feel for how far you can push and pull those controls, just so you're not too shy when you actually get up there. That's good. Alright, so down here's our throttle quadrant, so we've obviously got our thrust levers and then reverse thrusters. I'm going to get you to have a go at deploying those reverse thrust levers for me, so pull it back nice and hard. A little bit further. There you go, that's fully deployed. Alright, let's pop it back down. Good. So that first bit of resistance you felt, that was the actual deployment, and then that further pullback you did was the increase of thrust.
Yeah.
You're fully aware of how the flaps all work?
Yeah.
Perfect. So to operate the lever, basically you just lift it up,
Yeah.
you can move it back and forth when you need. You've got a couple of safety gates here and here. So while it's up, you won't pass through. Just got to let it drop in and lift in the direction you want to travel. So we're going to use flap 5 for takeoff. Would you like to set us that for now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Speed brake's over here, so you're aware of how the speed brake all works?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I'll be operating that one for our flight. Basically, I'll arm it when we come down for our landing, and then when we touch down, it'll automatically deploy. Parking brake, you can see it's currently engaged. So to disengage it, if you pop your feet up on the top of the pedals, yep, both of them, and then with both your feet, press down with your toes. Good. You can see how the pedals sort of lever, don't they?
Yeah.
So the top of those are the brakes for the aircraft, and then the bottom's the steering. Alright, cool. So that's all the controls. Going to the displays now. So primary flight display, speed tape, altimeter, so we're setting about 100 feet above sea level, and then we've also got our artificial horizon. So you're aware of what all these lines signify, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So what do they signify?
Isn't it like degrees?
Yeah, so it's degrees above the horizon. So for the nose, that black box is on the 10 line, would be 10 degrees above horizon. If we're at 5 degrees, would be on that slightly longer line, and then 2.5 degrees would be that very little line. So they all go up in 2.5 degree increments. Now display, pretty self-explanatory. You can see us, the runway, big compass showing where we're pointing. And then our multi-function displays, which are here and here, they can show us engine or system data. We're just going to keep our basic engine data up for the moment, so you can see we've got thrust, so sitting about 20%, the levers all the way back. Temperatures, fuel flows, and fuel quantities. Now, we'll go into a bit of our other systems as well, but I'll sort of breeze over them.
Yeah.
So we've got our FMCs, our flight management computers, where all our raw data is kept. So this will mainly be the first officer's job while the captain's off getting a coffee, putting all the flight plan details in. Down here we've got our pedestal, so we've got our radios, navigational aids, which are used for approaches and navigation and all that sort of stuff. And then we've got our transponder. Do you know what the transponder is? Don't stress too much, it's not a quiz. Basically, the transponder, it basically broadcasts our position to air traffic control. So you can see there's a code down there, 4263. Usually ATC will give us a code to broadcast. We would set that code down there, and then it would send out a unique beacon, which they can then pick up and see where we are. So what we can also do is we have a system called the TCAS, which you're probably familiar with, the collision avoidance system. That also works using the transponder too. So we can pick up other aircraft transponders, and that's how the TCAS sort of locates them. Alright, up here is our MCP, our mode control panel. So middle panel is mostly autopilot control, so you can see things like the IAS MAC, heading, altitude, that sort of stuff. And then on either side you can see very similar panels. They're for our screen adjustments on either side. Then up the top we've got our overhead, which is basically all our systems. Now, it may seem a little bit complicated at first, but they do actually sort of compartmentalize it a bit to make it a bit easier. So just looking at the panel as a whole, you can see first it's divided into columns, which makes it easier to scan through and check all the instruments. And then in those columns you can see that there's individual panels that can sort of stick out a little bit more than visual. So, for example, we've got our fuel pump panel, all the fuel pumps in one area, all our electrical buses are in another area, same with the hydraulics, all our heating, all that sort of stuff. So, if you know what system you need to look for, and normally if there's a warning going off, it'll direct you to the right system, all the information is available for you right there. Alright, so that's a bit of an overview. Do you have any questions about any of that?
No.
No? All pretty self-explanatory?
Yeah.
Alright, awesome. So, what we'll do our line-up checks, and we'll get onto the runway.
Okay.
So, do you want to turn all our landing lights on? That's good. We'll turn our strobe light on. We'll flick that one down. Sorry for the stretch. Our transponder, we're going to turn to TA-RA. So that means we're going to transmit our beacon. We can also receive other aircraft beacons. So our TCAS is working now.
Yeah.
And our fasten seatbelt sign, I want you to flick that off and on, nice and quick. Camera crew in the back now are ready for takeoff. So you always hear that just before you enter the runway. Alright, so let's get onto the runway. So if you want to put your left hand on that steering tiller, good. Your right hand on the thrust levers. You can see we're sitting at about 20% thrust right now, right?
Yeah.
So we want to bring our thrust up to 30%. As you push forwards, just watch this gauge. So start pushing the levers forwards. See that little line?
Yeah.
That's where the thrust will stabilize at. So if you put that on 30 and leave it there, you'll see the thrust will come up and it'll stay where you've left it. Good. Have a little look outside now. See we're moving forwards. Got a yellow taxi line on the left. Now, we've got one that branches out to the left of it, don't we?
Yeah.
We're following that one, and that'll line us up on the runway. Now, I'm going to take control of the thrust levers, just to bring the thrust a tad bit back. So, you can see the line up on the left now. Just try and bring us in line with the center as best you can, and then I'll take over. It's not easy, is it? Doing good. Alright, looks pretty good. I'll take over now. So I've got control. There we go. Alright, so we're pretty much bang on the center of the runway, pointing right down the middle, so you did a good job.
Yeah.
Now, it probably does feel a little bit like you're looking to the left of the runway, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just a bit. So that's completely normal, it's a bit of an optical illusion. Basically, we've got to keep in mind that where the aircraft is pointing will more inwards for us. So one little thing I like to use to make it a bit easier to sort of say where the aircraft is pointing is, see this glare shield up here?
Yeah.
See how it goes from angle to straight on that little corner right there? Use that as a bit of a crosshair, look out of the window at that point. Does it kind of line up with the center of the runway? Not exactly, but fairly close, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I like to use that as a bit of a approximate marker to try and figure out where the aircraft is pointing, which is quite useful when we want to come into land, because obviously we want to point the aircraft at the runway when we come down.
Yeah.
So that's something we can use a little bit later. Alright, so I'll run through our takeoff procedure and then we'll get up in the air. So the first thing you're going to be doing, we'll be going up to 40% thrust this time. Once that thrust actually reaches 40%, we'll say stabilized. When I say that, you're going to press this little black button here. And when you tap that, that'll arm our auto throttles. So we'll tap that and the thrust levers will automatically go up to take off power for us. And what your job is see how there's these little ridges on the pedal down below us? That's where you want your toes, because that's perfect. So maybe a little bit lower with the feet, there you go. Good. You'll be using those pedals to keep us nice and straight as we pick up speed rolling down the runway. The reason we have our feet low is obviously just so we don't touch those brakes.
Yeah.
So there'll be a couple of call-outs as we build out speed. I'll call 80 knots as a speed check, so don't stress too much about that. The aircraft will call V1, and then when I say rotate, you're going to bring the yoke back.
Yeah.
So we'll lift off the runway once you pull that back. I want you to keep holding it there. Once we're off the runway, I want you to look down here and bring the nose of the aircraft up to 15 degrees.
Okay.
Once it reaches 15, you can then relax on the controls and we'll start to do our after takeoff checks. So, a few steps, but I'll be walking you through it as we go.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, give us 40%. Very good. Stabilize. Tap that button now. Very good. Thrust is set. Those pedals are not as sensitive as the tiller, so that way you know what you're supposed to expect. knots. Rotate. Very good. Hold it there, you can see we're lifting off. So now looking at that artificial horizon, going up to 15 degrees. So there's 12 and a half, and perfect. Alright, so we're up in the air now. What we'll do, we'll get our landing gear up. So you sort of pull that out and lift it all the way up for me. There you go, you can hear the gear coming up now.
Yep.
We're bringing our flaps up to 1. Good. Alright, so we're above 1,000 feet.
Yep.
What we'll do, we'll bring our nose down to 10 degrees now. Good, so don't be shy, you see sometimes you need to push a little bit harder.
I never realized how hot
Heavy it is, yeah. It's definitely quite heavy. Now, one thing I didn't point out is these are our trim wheels, so they keep the aircraft stable as we fly. You see every time you relax on the controls, they start spinning. It's basically to hold the nose exactly where you've left it. Alright, awesome. So we're basically going to climb up to 3,000, passing about 2,500. So when we reach 2,800, I want you to push down to 5 degrees. So ready, and push. Going down to 5 degrees. Now with that, just put it a bit below the line. Good. And maybe just a hair's a bit lower. You don't want any bit of the box just sticking over the top. There we go, perfect. Now the reason I got you to put your nose there is because we're still going to get the pipes up a little bit, so I'll just pop the last stage up. But once it goes to up, you'll see we'll hold our altitude. So whenever we want to hold our altitude, that's where we're going to pop our nose, okay?
Okay.
Fantastic. So if you look out ahead, you can see we've got London out ahead of us. And basically, what we're going to do when you're ready, we'll start a left-hand turn.
Okay.
So you can look outside for this, but with the controls, just hold them to the left for me. Yep. You see we're going to start to go into the bank. Now the aircraft will stop the nose from dropping, so all we have to worry about is just going into that bank. So we can go in a little bit further, a little bit more, keep it going. Go a bit more than that. And that's good, you can relax there. This is a pretty standard turn after takeoff. We're at about 25 degrees of bank angle.
Okay.
Do you know where the bank angle indicator is? So think about it, if we want to know how turned the wings are, what's an instrument that already tells how the aircraft is flying?
How it is flying.
Like how the wings and the nose are positioned. Yeah, perfect. So on the artificial horizon at the top, that's our bank angle indicator. You can see we've got a little arrow that's pointing to where dead ahead is.
Yep.
Now each one of those little markers is indicating a 10-degree bank. So you can see it goes 10, 20, 30. We're in between 20 and 30, so we're at about 25. Yeah. Alright, so we've got a little bit of time now to have a chat about how we're going to do our first landing.
Okay.
So when we see the runway and we actually come down straight in on it, basically all the positioning we're going to be doing is out the window, so we won't rely too much on the instruments after that. Now you'll basically be just focusing mainly on bringing us down nice and straight. But as we're coming down, when we get a little bit closer to the runway, we're going to have a couple of extra jobs to do as we just before touchdown. I'll go into them in a second, but what I'll do right now is if you have a look out ahead, there's the airport.
Yeah.
What we want to do now is just fly straight. So let's come out of this turn now. Alright, good. So those jobs I was talking about, as you're coming down, you'll hear our altitude call-outs, which I'm sure you've heard 100 times, the 500 and 400. Yep. So with those, that's where our jobs will come in. So when we're quite low, almost about to touch down, you'll hear 200. Pop your right hand on the thrust levers. Then at 100, we'll be bringing them all the way back. Now, just before you touch down, you're going to pull back a bit on the yoke just to flare us out before we touch down. And then once we get down on the ground, we're going to go full power, and then we're going to take off again.
Okay.
So that's basically it. Just 200, hands on, 100 back, touch down, and then full power. Awesome. So, at about 3,000 at the moment. Let's go down to 2,100. So for a descent, we've got the 2.5 degree line, just below the box, right? So we're just going to push the nose down and set it right on that line now, okay?
Right.
So maybe just a little bit lower. Yeah, we want to pop it right on the line now. Perfect. You can see that gives a pretty good rate of descent, and that's what we'll use when we come into land as well. Alright, awesome. So, if you have a look at the map, you can see there's our runway, there's us. We're basically going to track out, make another 180-degree turn, and then come back in for landing.
Okay.
Alright, so we can actually prep for landing right now. We'll do that by going through our descent checklist. You're going to start reading that out for me.
Pressurization.
Yeah, so basically what we're going to do is just make sure the pressurization module will equalize when we touch down. So you can see it's asking for landing out. Now here's our pressurization module. There's our landing out. We just want to make sure that reads what the airport elevation is. We set it to about 100 feet, didn't we? So that's all good. Then on to the next check.
Recall.
Recall. So that's this black button up here. If you want to tap it in and release it for me, you see it'll light up. And if any of the lights stay on, it's a system we need to fix before landing. So you can see things like fuel, the electrics, doors and engines, that sort of stuff. So that's all good. Now on to the next check. Auto brake. So that's this little thing up here, yep. Now we're not going to use that just yet because we are doing a touch and go. Now before we go on the checklist, you can see we're about to reach our altitude.
Yeah.
So let's bring the nose back up to that position that we were holding to hold altitude. Alright, perfect. Good. So we can go on to the next check. That was after auto brake.
Okay, landing auto.
So you can see it's asking for VREF and minimums. Do you know those terms?
I've heard them.
Okay. So minimums refers to the minimum altitude we can go down to before we have to abort a landing if we can't see the runway. We've got a pretty nice day, so we don't have to really worry about that. So VREF mainly refers to the reference speed just before we pass the threshold. So pretty much our landing speed.
Yeah.
Now we can work the VREF down here on the FMC. So if you go to the menu, well, just the menu, that's all good, FMC, and then approach. These are all the flap settings we can use for landing, and those are our VREFs, or our landing speeds, right? We want to use flap 30 for landing, so double click that button for me. There we go. Now, 147 is our landing speed. We have 5 knots as a safety buffer for wind. So our landing speed becomes 152 knots. We just keep that in the back of our minds for later. So, let's start another left-hand turn. About the same as the first one, so get us in there nice and tight. A little bit more than that. Yeah, that's good. Relax there. Alright, so, like I said before, this is where the autopilot's being controlled. Now we have the auto throttle on. You can see speeds being held at 230 knots. So use that dial and wind us back to 210 knots now. Perfect. You can see the thrust lever is now coming back, and that's going to bring our speed back. Have you used much of the autopilot on the sim at home?
Actually no.
Really?
Like our flights, I just mainly just use my own hands.
Okay, I can show you a bit how that all works if you want.
Oh yeah.
On the next one. Obviously I want to keep it interesting for you.
Yeah.
Alright, so we'll bring our flaps down to 1 now. And we'll bring our speed down to 190. So now we're just slowly getting our speed down, bringing the flaps down, and getting ready for that landing. Good. Now I'll guide you with lining up on the runway, and then from there we're ready to do the landing. It's all looking pretty good. Bring our flaps down to 5. That's it. We'll bring our speed down to 170. There you go. I don't know if you can see it, but can you see the runways in the airport?
Yeah.
Now we're going for the right-hand runway. So we'll keep swinging around like this. Might actually widen out our turn a little bit. So turn a bit towards me now. Yeah, keep going, keep going. And relax about there, that's good. And actually, let's straighten up. Good. Alright, now when you're ready, bring our landing gear down. Bring our flaps down to 15. Start a bit of a left-hand turn. So we're almost lined up on the runway now. Basically, what I'll get you to do is look out to the right-hand runway and try and get it to about here on the windscreen, okay? So trying to put the nose right where it is. you are. You can look down here. The purple marker is where the runway is. The arrow is where we're pointing. So we're still a tad bit to the right. So this brings us a bit more to the left. Don't use that as a sort of guide, use it as just a calibration. So what we'll do now, bring our speed down to 160. And we'll push our nose down to 2.5 degrees again. So get us down there nice and quick. Push it a bit harder. Keep holding it down. And relax, that's good. Alright, now looking out in front, no more instruments, we're just going to land using the runway. So how are we tracking right now, do you reckon?
Kind of on the right.
Yeah, so let's turn a fair bit to the left. Good spot. So that's what we're going to be doing the whole way down. It's just making sure we're coming in nice and straight. Alright, that's good. So now we're coming back in on the runway. Now the one thing we will have to make sure we do is once we are aligned, we'll then have to do a tiny bit of a right hand turn to then point us back on the runway. Let's bring our flaps down 30. This is where we set our landing speed, 152. Stop here. Good. And just remember the first call out for our jobs will be 200, okay? Feel the aircraft sort of drifting, can't you?
Yeah.
That helps as well. Now we're lined up. Let's get a bit of a right hand turn going. Yeah, might need a little bit more. Might need a little bit more to the right. That's good. 200. Right hand on the thrust levers now. Keep focusing on bring us in. That's good. 100. Thrust levers back now. That's it. Hands on the controls, let's start pulling back on that yoke now.
20, 10,
and right. Just like touch down. Now, full power for me. Yep, I got the steering, it's okay. And rotate, let's get it back up in the air. Alright, awesome. All the way up to 15 degrees again. You can see after landing you need to fight the trim a little bit.
Yeah.
Good. Alright, awesome. Positive brake, let's get our gear up. Get our flaps up for 5, and let's start a left-hand turn when you're ready. Nice big left-hand turn, let's go. Alright, very good. Let's get our flaps up to 1. Alright, did you want to have a play around with the autopilot?
Yeah, sure.
Don't worry, it's something a bit different. So, I've got our speed set up, but that won't activate until you flick that auto throttle switch up. So, you can see now the auto throttle is set to 230 knots. Heading, set us for 270 degrees.
270.
That's it, 270. Good. Set our altitude for 2,100, which it is. Now autopilot engages just up there. There you go. So we're flying on a certain speed, a certain heading, and a certain altitude. Now if you have a look, up here it says command, which means our autopilot is on. And those are our autopilot modes at the top. So MCP speed being held up here. Heading select, so it's holding that magenta heading marker.
Yeah.
And altitude hold, so you can see it bring us down to 2,100. Now if you need to make adjustments on any of those headings, all you'd have to do is adjust that. In terms of the actual turn, you can see we can go between 10 and 30 degrees. Yep. And you can use this outer dial, where the white marker is, to then adjust that bank angle. Alright, awesome. Now you can see we're not descending too fast, down to 2,100, so let's speed it up a little bit. Go over to the vertical speed. That's it. We've only got a 300 foot per minute descent. Let's bump that up to 1,000. There you go, you see the nose is pitching down. Now it's going to hold 1,000 feet per minute. It'll come back up and stabilize it. But yeah, that's how that all goes. Now, because we've set 2,100 for our altitude, once we get down to that, then it will level itself at 2,100.
Yeah.
Pretty easy, hey?
Yeah. Well, I mean...
It makes sense. Obviously it's not
yes,
easy, but
it's not easy.
it's user-friendly as it can be.
Yeah.
Alright, so now that we're a bit more relaxed, let's go through our after takeoff checklist. This is what I've been doing. So
Engine leads.
switch up here. They are on. Yep.
Packs.
They are auto, so that's just air conditioning configuration, which is all good.
Landing gear up and off.
You want to put that off for me? And you know why we do that?
So I'm pretty sure it's just.
Well, basically, when you put it up, that activates the hydraulics that operate about 3,000 psi, so quite a fair bit of pressure. Now, once they're actually up, they're locked physically into place. So no need to have that pressure in the hydraulics anymore.
Yeah.
That just takes off a bit of the wear and tear of it. Alright, awesome. And then the last check is flaps are up, no lights. So that's just looking up here on the flap indicator, make sure it's up, not in transition or extended. Now I'm going to do that descent checklist for us this time. So pressurization is set, recall is checked. Do you want to set our auto brake to 3 for me? That'll apply our max safe braking, and our landing speed is going to be 152 knots. Now,
Right?
pardon?
Oh, no, I said right.
Oh, okay, cool. Now we'll disconnect the autopilot now. So where your left hand goes, see how there's a little button on the left side? Double click that for me. And you're back in control. So let's bring our speed down to 210. And let's start another left hand turn. Now this time I'm going to get you to line us up to the runway. So turn to the left, look down here. That's us. That's our flight path. So you can see as we turn in, it's getting steep to the left. That's good, that's what we want. We're actually going to line up on this purple line, okay? So bring us in on that turn a little bit steeper. That's good. And leave it about there for the moment. We want to end up on the purple line somewhere around that star, okay?
Yes.
Alright, awesome. Now we'll start getting ready. We'll bring our flaps down to 1. Bring our speed down to 190. They're looking good. Just setting our heading up for the runway. That's good. Bring our flaps down to 5. Speed down to 170 now. Good. Now, having a look at that, how does that turn look? Perfect. Yeah, so just bring it out a little bit and relax it there. Now that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Looks like it's coming right onto the purple line. Very good.
Just wait until we get into the curve.
That's it. So we just have to wait now. You can see the airport out ahead of us.
Yeah, I see it.
So basically what we'll do, we won't adjust the turn at all until you see the runway hit around where you think the aircraft is pointing. And then that should, once we bring the wings back to level, that should basically put us right on the approach path. So don't turn it out just yet. Only turn it out when you think we're lined up on the runway. Alright, that's perfect. Let's bring our landing gear down. Let's get our flaps down to 15. And our speed down to 160. And let's get our nose down to 2.5 degrees, nice and quick. So push a little bit harder. Very good. Alright, so you can look out in front now, so we're not going to rely on the instruments anymore. Basically, we're just going to use what we can see out the window. So we're pretty bang on straight, aren't we? You
Yeah.
can tell by how the runway, it's not skewed in either direction.
Yeah.
So you can use that to help you as well if we do go off track. You can sort of see that it will start to angle itself. Now, as we're traveling, do you see any change in how we're traveling as we sort of go along? That's good, that's good. So we need to adjust for that a little bit to the right. I see you using the nav display. Sometimes it can be a little bit misleading because it doesn't give you the exact positioning on how you are with the runway. Alright, so let's bring our flaps down to 30. Now this time, when we touch down, we're going to use reverse thrust, okay?
Okay.
Speed down to 152. And get our speed brake. Perfect. Alright, so I'll let you know right now we are a tad bit low on approach. So what we'll do, if you look at the runway, keep your eyes on the runway, pull back on the controls and just try and lift the nose up a little bit. So eyes on the runway, we want to watch the change in the nose. Good. And that way we don't take our eyes off the final goal. Okay, so looking pretty good. Almost bang on.
200.
That's it.
400.
Good spot.
300.
Still a little bit to the left, so flick us a bit to the right.
200.
Should we start?
Just at 100. That's okay, no stress.
100.
There we go, good. Alright, now ready, and we're going to pull back on the controls a little bit now.
40. 30.
And then relax.
20.
Now just let the aircraft touch itself down.
Approaching.
Perfect. Now reverse thrusters. And get your feet on those rudder pedals nice and low. Nice and low. That's good. That way we can let the auto brakes do their job. Alright, now keep your right hand on those reverse thrusters for me. So just nothing. And 60 knots, let's disengage. Awesome. Now you can see we've got a bit of a taxiway on the left here.
Yeah.
What we'll do, can you see our taxi line?
Yes.
Perfect. So using the tiller, I'll control our speed if you just want to get us on the runway. Alright, good. Slide your feet up to the top of those rudder pedals now. That's good. Just have them ready. Alright, now start applying pressure on the top of those pedals. So basically just put on the brakes. And we'll come to a stop. Good. Now hold them down for me. Bring your right hand over here. Pull the parking brake back and hold it back.
Oh.
That's good. And then release the pedals. There you go. Parking brake set. And we're nice and stopped down at Heathrow now. Very nicely done. Alright, you can get the fasten seatbelt if you want. And that's us.